Hello, my name is Ben Rittenauer. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Accountability in Action. Today we have Chris Rice joining us from McConkey Insurance and Benefits. I'll let him fill you in a little bit more about who they are and what they do, but the brief synopsis from my perspective is they do insurance and benefits and supporting their customers in a broker type environment. But Chris, fill us in a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So yeah, I'll start just a little bit more with McConkey Insurance and Benefits. We do all types of insurance. So we do everything from your commercial, auto, buildings, workers' comp. We also do, we have a large presence in the employee benefits space, so your medical, dental, that sort of benefits as well. And I come in with a niche that they refer to as executive benefits, okay, where we provide an additional layer of benefits on top of maybe what your employer provides. So, you know, if you need a little something extra either for executives or to recruit and retain, we have all that. And then McConkey also does, we also do some auto and home personal lines as well. And then we also do surety bonding for your construction clients if anybody would need any sort of surety bonds. And as far as myself, I actually started my career as a CPA. Yep. That's, you know, I worked for a local firm for a few years doing small business tax and comps. And then I was in financial advising for almost a decade, okay, where I worked with, you know, highly comped individuals, high net worth individuals to kind of do their financial planning, estate planning, investment management. And that brings me to McConkey, where I now I'm part of the executive benefits team there. So, like I said, we provide an additional layer of benefits for your highly comped people and your executives and business owners. But we also, in general, the executive benefits also does any sort of individual life, long-term care, and disability as well.
So the first question is, can you give me a current overview of the current state of executive benefits?
It's not only executives and highly comped, it's just anybody that's important to any organization. Fair. Especially where you're at in the labor market now with the labor shortage where it's at, you're thinking it's really hard to recruit people, especially key people that, you know, there's a lot of turnover. You have a lot of people leaving important positions now to maybe retire. They decided that they're done. Yep. It's just hard to recruit and it's hard to retain. So these are just additional tools that you can use, such as, you know, executive bonus plans, with permanent life insurance options that you can use vesting schedules to keep people around. Okay. And there's a lot of other things, additional disability insurance, voluntary long-term care insurance. But essentially, the current environment is all about recruiting and retaining more than it has so been in a long time. Sure. You know, so that's really what we're seeing a lot of.
There's always been a high value on those people you want to keep around, and when there's less of them, there's less of them in the pool, then the ones that you have become more valuable.
Absolutely.
Makes sense. Yep. Okay, so along those lines, is there an interesting statistic you can think of as it relates to executive benefits that our listeners and viewers might enjoy hearing about?
Sure, yeah. So a lot of times, you know, business kind of insure things that they have to. Like, for instance, workers' comp insurance, you have to have that. It's not an option. You can't just say that somebody's on their own if they're hurt anymore. Yep. You know, you want to cover your buildings. If something happens to that costs a lot of time and money to replace. You'd lose a lot of productivity. You obviously want to insure your autos, depending on your type of business. But what a lot of people don't think about is insuring their key people in their business. Mm-hmm. So a survey that I found said that 72% of companies polled said they have at least one or two people that they agree they could not do business without. So one or two employees, 72% of companies agree to that. The interesting part of that is that only 22% have any sort of coverage on any key person in their business. So if something were to happen to them, they would just be kind of left out in the cold. They wouldn't, you know, whether it's somebody that's like a brain trust of a new technology that's invented where if they went away, nobody would know what to do. Right. Or somebody that just has all the relationships where if they would leave, it would be hard to keep them going and there would be it might be a revenue hit there. So it's just something to think about, that there's a huge gap in that coverage there between what people realize they have key people, but they don't have any coverage to insure against the possible loss of them, whether that's due to loss of life or even disability is even more common, that they can't work because of they get, you know, chronically ill or just hurt in general. So it's something to think about.
No, it is. And do the statistics align with what you feel and experience when you're working with clients? I mean, is that something that you see practically happening?
Well, I would say that's more of like a general survey, but when you work with a company like McConkey, we take the holistic approach to everything.
Fair.
So we're going to make sure that you're covered in that area, because part of what any good agency does is they make sure that you are covered for risk that you might not even be aware of.
Yeah, fair.
Because that's where they can really sneak up on you, and it's our job to help you realize those risks and cover them.
Makes sense.
So, but yeah, I'd say, but when I first talked to companies, like before we broach the subject of possible keepers insurance, yeah, that's probably a good percentage that, maybe one in 5 companies have that sort of coverage.
Okay. Makes sense. I believe it. Next question. Are there some cutting edge ideas that people might not be aware of, or that might, just not be on their radar, that you're seeing people utilize that would be good for people to know about?
Yeah, so cutting edge, I kind of mentioned, we get into some, not so much executive benefits, but individual benefits. This kind of broaches both of them. A new thing that has recently emerged is a voluntary guaranteed issue long-term care coverage.
Okay.
So I'm going to rewind there for a second, because that was a lot of words.
It was.
So first of all, it's voluntary, so it's payroll deduct. So your employees are going to pay for it.
Okay.
Now, obviously, the employer can pay for it if they want to by reimbursement, but it's meant to be payroll deduct.
Okay.
So it comes right out of somebody's paycheck. So it's ease of administration there. Then you have, so it's voluntary, guaranteed issue is the other part that I said. So guaranteed issue just means no underwriting.
Wow.
So if you have somebody that's otherwise not insurable, this could be huge for them, because they won't be able to go out to the market because they have a certain medical condition or whatever, and they won't be able to get coverage. So that's voluntary, guaranteed issue, long-term care. So long-term care is another kind of risk that a lot of people are sort of aware of, but sometimes they don't know how to mitigate that risk.
Right.
You can insure against the risk of have a possible long-term care event, because as you know, it's 50% of everybody over 70 years old is probably going to need long-term care at some point.
Wow. Okay.
And it's not, we're not talking about, medical insurance is going to cover it or anything like that. This is out of your pocket.
Yeah.
So, something this is kind of like a more new in the sense that guaranteed issue and long-term care were never really in the same sentence before, because there's very strict underwriting usually. And this is something that you can offer to your whole employee and population, and then whoever wants it can utilize it. So that's probably a new and cutting edge thing that we have.
Yeah, no doubt, something I haven't heard of before. But long-term care costs can be significant, to your point, and when those significant costs are coming out of pocket, people can feel the pinch.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I know that from my days in the financial advising for almost a decade. The number one thing that you looked at when you were looking at somebody's retirement plan is always the biggest bogey was, what if you had a long-term care plan? What if you went into a facility?
Yeah.
And that can quickly drain the majority of your assets and leave, your partner or your dependents with next to nothing of this nest egg that you worked for 30, 40 years.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a fact pattern that happens.
It is, and it's not becoming any less relevant.
Yeah, fair. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Next question isn't too different from the other ones, but is there something or a product or an opportunity out there that people might not be aware of that's out there for them to utilize? Not necessarily new, but just something that you see that might be underutilized.
Yeah, so another thing that underutilized is a good point, because it's underinsured. There's a lot of people that are underinsured for disability insurance because they take it for granted, and they take their employer provided disability insurance and say, oh, I have coverage. But what a lot of people don't take the time to look into, maybe obviously some people do, but a lot of times they don't realize that there's limits to that coverage.
Fair.
So group provided disability insurance has limits, both a percentage of your total income, and then there's monthly max payouts.
Right.
So a lot of times that's $5,000 monthly max. So take that into a year, that's $60,000. For your highly comped individuals, that's
There's a shortfall.
There's a shortfall. So you have a big gap there, a big disparity.
Right.
And there are solutions available that you can bridge that gap. You can say specifically for X number of people making over a certain dollar of money, you can quote unquote, it's not ERISA, you don't have to be ERISA compliant.
Okay.
You can carve out, as they call it, a certain subset of individuals and offer them additional disability insurance. Again, this is another guaranteed issue sort of thing. So this is something that if you have, a lot of companies have a large gap for a large portion of people.
Right.
And you're able to take this, what they call essentially individual disability or executive disability insurance plans and fill that gap in the disability insurance that a lot of people don't realize is there.
Fair. No, and I've seen it before too, where when you start putting pen to paper and say, do you realize if you're planning on disability covering this event, that this is what you're looking to cover, and is that really what you intend it to cover?
Exactly.
And oftentimes the answer is no, well, we kind of thought there'd be more than that. All right, last question. What are some challenges that you see businesses facing as they try to address executive benefits?
So this actually plays into the recruiting and retaining portion I was getting to earlier. There's not as many people around to do the variety of jobs that need to be done.
Yep.
So the time to consider anything that's kind of an ancillary sort of coverage, other than what's absolutely necessary, is often being put on the back burner.
Fair.
Now, and that's a huge challenge now. It's because it's not that they know that it's needed and important. It's just like there are only so many hands to go around,
And only so many hours in a day.
especially on the decision maker kind of level of a lot of clients that we deal with.
Fair.
They're wearing more hats than ever.
Yeah.
So it's just harder to even find the time to really consider additional coverage lines at this point, that even though they know they need, it's just they literally don't have time to think about it.
They want to go home at some point in time, and it doesn't make it to the top of the list.
Exactly.
No, it makes sense that would be a reality, no doubt.
Yep.
Good. Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate you coming and spending some time with us
Sure
today.
thing.
You're giving me some things to think about. Hopefully, you're giving everybody some things to think about. It seems like you should have, but appreciate the information.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Ben.
All right, great. Take care.
Thank you.